Chapter 4390. Huan looked down. I don't care. You should ask Rongyu. Yes, thank you, Director I Meng said in a low voice and turned to leave. Huan stopped her. Wait a minute. I Meng turned back. Huan said in a low voice, you can ask me if you need any help. I Ming's eyes were watery. She couldn't describe the feeling. She grunted in agreement and left. On the other hand, Huan stood at the original spot for quite a while before driving away. She settled some matters in the studio and went to pick up Huan in the afternoon. However, she bumped into Qin Mo and Suilio at the school gate. They came to pick up Huan together. It seemed that they wanted to get along with her. Huan got out of the car and walked to Qin Mo. I want to talk to Huan alone. Qin Mo didn't say anything. Huan walked over, hugged and kissed Huan. Uncle Rongyu is sick. I need to take care of him. Huan, can you live with your parents and grandma for a while? I'll pick you up when I'm done. But Huan put her arms around her neck. I want to be with Mom. She refused to let go. How could the little girl not understand that her dad and mom were going to be separated? She would rather stay with her mom because her dad had Aunt Sue and her mom was alone. The little girl was very sensible. I can let Grandma take care of me, and we can let Grandma Lon live with us. Mom's house is also very big. She was afraid that Huan wouldn't agree, so she put her face close to her and acted like a spoiled child. Huan's heart softened and she felt sorry for her. She said, I'll talk to Dad. Now that he had someone else by his side, she thought that they were completely over. Huan talked to Qin Mo like an ex-wife. Huan can stay with me. Qin Mo stood in front of his Mulsan and said calmly, don't you have to take care of Rongyu? Will you have time to take care of Huan? Huan bit her lower lip. I can let Aunt Lon take care of her. Qin Mo continued calmly. Aunt Lon is a member of the Qin family. Are you sure you want to take care of her? Although he said it calmly, the meaning behind his words was a little hurtful. She was divorced from him, so she was no longer a member of the Qin family. Moreover, they weren't even a couple now. He had another woman by his side, and that woman was sitting in the car waiting for him. She was also very gentle to Huan. Huan knew that she was being a little stingy, but he was really annoying. She lowered her voice and said, I'll find someone to take care of him. That's all. Just as she was about to leave with Huan, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. Huan. Is there anything else, CEO Qin? She didn't want to shy away from him in front of Huan. Qin Mo let go of her hand and said softly, Huan's surname is Qin. I'll get someone to send Aunt Lon over later. Then, he carried Huan to Huan's car and kissed her. I'll pick you up on the weekend. At this time, Suilio was not there and Huan was a few meters away. Huan put her arms around her father's neck and asked softly, can't you take care of the baby together in the future? Qin Mo was stunned. He looked down at Huan's big eyes. She was pure and beautiful, but now she was pitiful. His heart suddenly softened. He couldn't describe the feeling. His heart ached a little. In the end, he could only kiss his little daughter. Dad will always be here. Chapter 4391. He reached out to stroke his daughter's head and said in a hoarse voice, Huan, be a good girl. I don't want to be a good girl. Huan shrugged her little head and looked pitiful. Qin Mo couldn't help kissing her soft little face and said, then Daddy will visit you every other day. No need, the little girl said, Mommy won't be happy. Qin Mo felt very upset in his heart. At this time, Huan happened to come over. He straightened up and closed the car door. He said calmly, "Take good care of her. I'll ask the driver to send her clothes to your place." Huan nodded and got into the car. Her attitude was very indifferent. She would not be angry or jealous because of the matter between him and Suilio. Chinamo thought silently that she would not do anything for him. She was busy taking care of Rongyu now. How could she think of him? Thinking of this, he calmed down a little and took a step back. Huan drove the car away. Chinamo stood there quietly for a long time until Suilio rolled down the window and called his name. "Chinamo, why don't you get in the car?" His eyes were still fixed on the distance. Then he looked away and got into the car. He looked at Suilio and said, "I'll take you back to the company." Her lips moved, but in the end, she said nothing. Huan went to the hospital again after settling the little girl down. It was already nightfall. When Huan got out of the car, she remembered that she had not eaten anything today. She thought that she would eat later when she got back. She went to the hospital to see Rongyu and found out that Ai Meng Meng did not come because Rongyu looked very normal. Huan and Qin Chen talked for a while. After thinking for a while, she said to Rongyu, "I saw Ai Meng Meng during the day. She said she wanted to take care of you." Before she could finish her sentence, Rongyu sat up and stared at Huan. "She's here." Huan nodded and said, "I don't know where she got the news, but she will come. It depends on whether you are willing or not." Rongyu knew his legs and was a little hesitant. Huan stared at him for a long time before saying in a low voice, "Actually, it's nothing. I asked Qin Chen, and he said that he can have a baby. Moreover, he will cure you." Rongyu lay down quietly and said, "I need to think about it." Huan smiled and said, "Didn't you come to see her before?" Rongyu looked at her and did not say a word. Huan whispered, "I know." She patted Rongyu's shoulder and said, "I will come back." Just as he finished speaking, he felt a wave of dizziness, and his head swayed twice. Rongyu immediately went to pick her up, no longer caring about the difference between men and women. At this moment, Qin Chen came over. There was originally some misunderstanding. Rongyu's voice was very low. She fainted. Qin Chen immediately came over and looked at Huan's pale face. Qin Chen was a doctor as well as a woman. She immediately realized what was going on. She picked Huan up and walked out of the door like a boyfriend. Rongyu wanted to get out of bed, but Qin Chen said, "Wait here for news." Rongyu clenched his fists and loosened them. He felt that something terrible had happened. Huan woke up in less than 10 minutes. She opened her eyes and looked at the doctor in front of her. His face was familiar. Unconsciously, she softly called out, "Qin Chen." Qin Chen was wearing a surgical gown. He held her hand and comforted her gently. Huan, relax. It won't hurt much." She only called Huan when she was young because she was small and always followed Qin Mo. Later, when she became her sister-in-law, Qin Chen never called her that. Chapter 4392. Huan raised her head and looked at Qin Chen. In his eyes, which were similar to Qin Mo's, she saw heartache. And this heartache stung her. Huan had given birth before. Almost immediately, she had a premonition. Although she had received regional anesthesia, her female instincts told her that something had happened to her. She was pregnant and the child was being lost. Huan's eyes were wide open. There was an unprecedented emptiness in them. If she could, she remembered that she didn't want to lose it. Her body was losing something, but something seemed to be stirring. She gripped the bedsheets tightly and tears slid down the corners of her tightly closed eyes. Qin Chen couldn't bear to see her like this. He said in a low voice, "It's okay, Huan Huan. Qin Chen had done the surgery himself and tried to do the best he could. She didn't dare to imagine Qin Mo's reaction and how they would go on. Qin Mo definitely didn't like Suilio. If he did, it was probably because he wanted to tell his mother. But who could say for sure when it came to feelings? The surgery ended in about an hour with the least amount of pain. After it was over, Qin Chen carried He Huan carefully to the bed and sent her to the VIP room. He Huan fell asleep from exhaustion and sadness. Qin Chen took out his phone and called Qin Mo. It didn't go through. She was a little angry and called Secretary He. Secretary He picked up. Dr. Qin, are you looking for President Qin? President Qin is holding a press conference. What's so important that he won't pick up my call? Qin Chen was a little annoyed. Get Qin Mo to come and answer the phone immediately. Secretary He was still a little troubled. President Qin is holding a press conference and might announce the engagement. Also, he gave the copyright of Mr. Rong's script to Miss Su, maybe. Qin Chen's voice turned cold. No matter what he announces, go in and tell him immediately that his ex-wife miscarried and is now lying in the hospital. If he continues to act like this, I won't be able to help him. Tell him that his ex-wife is talented and beautiful. Even if she had a child and got divorced, many men would still want her. Secretary He was trembling with fear at that moment. He Huan had a miscarriage. Previously, she also felt that the public relations department was a little unreliable. They had to rely on President Qin's personal feelings. However, after the proposal was made, President Qin didn't seem to have any intention to refute it. It was as if he had acquiesced. At this moment, Secretary He knew the gravity of the situation. It was a gamble. She opened the door to the conference room. Qin Mo and Suilio were sitting together amidst a sea of reporters. Beside them were the higher-ups of King Entertainment. And they were talking about the copyright, and they had even finished. Secretary He's heart skipped a beat. Hearing the MC's passionate voice expressing President Qin's special concern for Miss Su, she hurriedly walked over and whispered a few words into Qin Mo's ear. Qin Mo's expression immediately turned solemn. He stood up and walked towards the door. After taking a few steps, he paused and stood there. Looking at the reporters in the conference room, he told the security director to delete all the photos in their hands and stop them from writing nonsense. The crowd was in an uproar. This was too domineering. It was almost unreasonable. While the security director was stunned, Suilio had already understood Qin Mo's choice. She flipped her hair and smiled bitterly. In the past, she had heard people say how much Qin Mo loved He Huan. She didn't really believe it, but now she really believed it. Indeed, he loved her very much. Chapter 4393. The scene was in a deadlock. Qin Mo couldn't care less. He left the conference room and drove to the hospital. It was already an hour later when he arrived at Xingyuan Hospital. Qin Chen was watching He Huan. When he saw Qin Mo coming, he immediately came over and said in a low voice, "Brother." Qin Mo walked past her and stood in front of He Huan's bed. He Huan's face was pale, and she didn't look well. Qin Mo whispered, "Is it because the child is gone?" Qin Chen walked to his side, put a hand on his shoulder, and gently stroked him. "You will have children in the future. She won't forgive me." Qin Mo murmured, "We haven't been on good terms recently. I was angry with her, so I deliberately used Suilio to annoy her. I never thought that He Huan would be pregnant." Qin Chen couldn't help but say, "Brother, don't you know if He Huan will be pregnant?" Qin Mo closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were full of pain. He sat on the edge of the bed, gently stroked He Huan's face, and said in a hoarse voice, "Huan Huan." He Huan's eyes were still closed, but her long eyelashes trembled slightly. So, he knew that she was actually awake. His fingers gently stroked her eyelashes, like a small brush in his palm. He said in a low voice, "I know you're awake. Open your eyes, okay?" He Huan didn't move. She just lay there quietly, but she couldn't help but shed tears. Qin Emo couldn't bear to see that, so he reached out to wipe her tears, but new tears came out again. In the end, he lowered his head and kissed them. After a few times, He Huan finally couldn't help but turn her face away, unwilling to be entangled with him anymore. Qin Mo's fingers gently stroked her face, and his voice was hoarse. Huan, I want to rest." He Huan closed her eyes, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes again. Qin Emo couldn't bear to see that. He sat next to her and said in a gentle and hoarse voice, "I won't disturb you. I'll stay here." Now that he had calmed down, he got up and glanced at Qin Chen, gesturing for him to go out together. Qin Chen followed him out to her office. Qin Emo whispered after a long time, "What happened?" "I happened to see He Huan fainting, and then I found out that she went into shock because of blood loss." "Brother," Qin Chen said as he put his hand on Qin Mo's shoulder and hugged him. "You're still young." She didn't know how to comfort him, so she could only say a few words. Qin Emo stood alone in her office for a while, smoked a cigarette, and then went to He Huan's ward. He Huan, on the other hand, sat up with a pale face. The two nurses helplessly persuaded her to lie down and rest. But she just sat there in a daze, her fingers on her belly, her eyes empty. There used to be a child here, but she didn't know when she lost it. She didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. Thinking of this, she felt a sharp pain in her heart. She looked up at Qin Mo. Qin Mo's Adam's apple moved a little, and he walked over and said in a hoarse voice, "Lie down and rest." "I want to go home," He Huan murmured weakly with her face on the headboard, as if she was talking to herself. Qin Mo's heart ached. "I'll take you home in 2 days. You can live in an apartment or a villa." He Huan was in a daze. After a long time, she suddenly looked up at him and said in a hoarse voice, "I can't go back, Qin Mo. We can't go back either." Chapter 43-94. With that said, she lowered her eyes and immersed herself in her own world. In the end, a child still separated them from each other. Qin Mo sat beside her, feeling a sense of helplessness that he had never felt before. He reached out, wanting to touch her, but he could not find a reason to. In the end, he could only retract his hand. He could not even say sorry. It was because of their falling out that they lost this child. He Huan was so upset that she eventually fell asleep. Qin Mo squatted beside her and gently caressed her brows. He felt that she was extremely delicate, but her eyelids were a little pink, probably because she had been crying. He Huan rarely cried, but she cried for so long, even in her dreams. When she woke up, it was already evening. The moment she woke up, her long eyelashes trembled and a teardrop stained her eyes. It was as though she had just woken up from a dream. After waking up, she sat there in a daze for a while before she felt a pain in her lower abdomen. It was not very intense, but it was a faint pain that felt as though a thin needle was piercing her heart. She sat up in a daze. Qin Mo came in from outside with a lunchbox in his hand. It was sent over by Auntie Lan from home. Auntie Lan had wanted to meet He Huan, but Qin Mo was afraid that it would make the two of them sad, so he said that they would talk after they left the hospital. He Huan wanted to stay in the hospital for a week, so he accompanied her. In reality, she only wanted to stay for 3 days, but he was worried and put down all his work to accompany her. At this moment, he looked at her sitting on the side of the bed. She sat there quietly, and tears, one by one, rolled down her face. It was silent, but it was heart-wrenching. Chin Mo looked at her quietly and walked over to put the food down before hugging her gently. Cry if you want to. Yeah, I'm here. He Huan's face rested on his shoulder. She wanted to struggle, but he pressed down on her head to prevent her from moving. His voice was low and hoarse. You don't even want to let me hug you. She could not break free, and in the end, she collapsed on his shoulder helplessly. He Huan cried sadly. That kind of pain was hard to bear and forget, and it came at such an unbearable time. In the end, she cried as though she had fallen asleep, but she was actually very weak. He Huan had always been healthy since he was young, but this time, it was obvious that his vitality was greatly damaged. Although she was weak, she still pushed Chin Mo away and leaned against the headboard. I don't need your care. Chin Mo stood by the bed, looking hurt. You don't need me anymore, or you don't love me anymore. He Huan, tell me. He Huan was still weak. She leaned against the headboard and smiled. On the day of my accident, you gave Rong Yu's copyright to Su Ilio. You were supposed to announce your engagement, right? Chin Mo, one miscarriage really won't change anything. You can still go and please someone else. You can still announce it. I should thank you for not questioning who the child belongs to. Chin Mo narrowed his eyes. The news of that day still spread. Chin Mo's voice was heavy. It's just a publicity stunt. I don't want to hear it from Chin Mo. It has nothing to do with me. No matter what, this child is really not at the right time. She tilted her face to the other side and smiled bitterly. Chin Mo, you should go back. I don't need your care. He looked at her and felt that she was distant and determined. He got up and looked at her quietly. Will you eat properly when I'm not around? Chapter 43-95. He Huan didn't say anything. She was just immersed in her own sadness. Chin Mo stood there quietly for a while before whispering, I'll ask Chin Chen to take care of you. As he spoke, he walked out. He Huan was still sitting there without moving. When Chin Chen came over, he saw that He Huan had already gotten up from the bed and was standing by the window. He didn't know what she was looking at. Huan Huan. Chin Chen called her and then walked over gently. He put one hand on her shoulder and let He Huan lean on his shoulder. Although Chin Chen was a girl, she was very tall and He Huan was small, so they looked strangely compatible when they stood together. Chin Mo stood outside the ward and watched quietly. There was an indescribable pain in his eyes. He was heartbroken to lose this child, but he was even more heartbroken for He Huan. She was usually the most afraid of pain. She cried a lot when she gave birth to Yi Huan, and now she had an abortion. He didn't dare to imagine how much pain she was in after the surgery. It hadn't been long, but she was already unwilling to stay in the hospital bed and by his side. The disgust in her eyes made his heart ache, but he couldn't bear to leave her side no matter how much it hurt. Chin Mo took a few steps back and went to the corridor on the other side to smoke. He hadn't slept for the past 2 days, just staying by her side. At this time, he was also tired, so he needed to smoke a few cigarettes to calm himself down. In the ward, He Huan leaned on Chin Chen's shoulder. She was very weak and her body was in pain. But her heart was in even more pain. The loss of this child was more like the end of her and Chin Mo. Actually, he didn't let her down. They were divorced, and having a relationship was consensual. No one had expected that she would have a child. She didn't want to be angry with him. Adults had to be responsible for their own decisions. He Huan leaned on Chin Chen for a long time before she whispered, I'm hungry. Chin Chen smiled and said, I'll feed you. He Huan wanted to refuse, but Qin Chen put one hand on her shoulder and said, I rarely coax people. Give me some face. As she spoke, she helped He Huan to sit on the bed and started to feed her soup. The soup was made by Auntie Lan. It looked, smelled, and was warm. He Huan's eyes were a little wet. She could tell that it was Auntie Lan's soup, but between her and Qin Chen probably sensed her emotions and sighed. My parents don't know yet, and Qin can't tell them. But He Huan, are you really not willing to forgive him? After this incident, she thought that Qin probably wouldn't have Su Ilio or Wang Ilio anymore. He Huan probably wouldn't be able to handle these things anymore. However, He Huan probably wouldn't be with Qin anymore. As she asked, He Huan looked at Qin Chen. After a while, she said in a low voice, Chen, I don't want to see him. I don't know how to get along with him. I don't want to see him, and I don't know how to get along with him. She could only blame him for the scandal with Su Yilu on the day of her miscarriage. He had even given Rong Yu's script to Su Yilu. This was a huge blow to He Huan. It couldn't be considered forgiveness, but with so many things put together, there was no way to continue. He Huan knew that King Entertainment was trying their best to suppress the news that day. But without the photos, the reporters still had their mouths and hands. Hence, Weibo's trending topic didn't stop for a few days. Su Cheng made a few calls. He Huan only said that she knew, but she didn't say anything about her miscarriage. Chapter 4396. Her parents were friends with Qin Mo's parents, and they were already unhappy because of her and Qin Mo. She didn't want it to worsen further, as it was really unnecessary. But what He Huan didn't know was that after she and Qin Mo broke up, their relationship was no longer broken. Qin Chen listened quietly. She could imagine her brother's tragic future. He really wouldn't die if he didn't court death. Qin Chen took the leftover food out. Qin Mo was at the door, and he glanced at the food in her hand. She ate? Yes. Qin Chen lowered his voice. Let's talk in my office. Qin Mo looked at her, but he still followed her. When they reached the office, Qin Chen closed the door and looked at his second brother. Qin Mo could be considered a genius, but he was defeated by He Huan. Actually, He Huan was very good, and they were really, Qin Chen said slowly, are you going to waste time with He Huan like this? Qin Mo didn't say anything. He just lit a cigarette, but Qin Chen snatched it away and pinched it. You don't eat or sleep. Do you want to go to heaven and get back your wife like this? Qin Mo closed his eyes slightly. I know what I'm doing. What are you talking about? Qin Chen cursed. Have you forgotten about your stomach problems? How are you going to take care of He Huan when it hurts? Qin Mo looked down at his sister, and after a long time, he said softly, I know. Qin Chen called the internal line and asked her little secretary to send food to Qin Mo. She ate with Qin Mo. After eating, Qin Chen stretched and yawned. I'm going to sleep for a while. You take care of your ex-wife. You only have yourself to blame for being hated. Qin Mo didn't say anything and went back to the ward. He Huan sat on the bed and looked out the window. No one knew what she was thinking. Qin Mo slowly walked over and reached out to touch her face. He Huan seemed to be frightened and immediately bounced away. She looked at him with a distant gaze. Qin Mo's voice was a little hoarse. Why don't you lie down? He Huan looked down. I want to sit for a while. Qin Mo just looked at her and didn't say anything for a long time. He just took a pillow and put it behind her to make her feel more comfortable. He then poured a glass of water for her and gently said, I'll help you refill it when it's cold. He Huan didn't say anything. He looked at her deeply again before going to the sofa to deal with his work. He opened his laptop for a long time but couldn't get into it. Later, secretary he came over and said something before leaving. About 2 or 3 hours later, Chin Mo looked up and saw that Hee-hwan was still sitting there, so he closed his laptop. What are you thinking about? Hee-hwan seemed to wake up from a dream. She glanced at Chin Mo and whispered, "You can go back. The nurse can take care of me." Chin Mo sat there quietly. There was no sadness or joy in his eyes. After a long time, he said, "Hee-hwan, the child is mine. It's no better for you to lose me." Hee-hwan closed her eyes and slowly shifted to lie down, covering her head with her hands. This was yet another action of self-protection and rejection. Chin Mo just watched quietly, his heart as heavy as still water. After a long time, he slowly opened his laptop. The blue light shone on his face, making him look even gloomier. In the following days, he didn't leave, and Hee-hwan couldn't do anything about it. She didn't talk to him, and he didn't force her. He just stayed with her. Chapter 4397. For days later, Hee-hwan's body was much better and she could walk around freely. Although she still had some pain, she could really be discharged. She had said that to Chin, but Chin shrugged and glanced at a certain man. He then said to Hee-hwan, "I can't make the decision." Hee-hwan was a little angry. She bit her lip and looked at Chin. "I can be discharged. Why don't you let me?" Chin was also a little helpless. "Chin Mo won't let you." At that moment, Chin Mo was sitting on the sofa dealing with work. Occasionally, he would take a call and he didn't look at them as they chatted. Hee-hwan talked for a long time, but Chin didn't agree. In the end, Chin went to do his ward rounds. Hee-hwan couldn't do anything about it. She could only ignore him and read the news on her phone. After a while, Chin Mo got up and took the phone from her hand. He said calmly, "Don't use electronic products." Hee-hwan's hand was empty, and he looked at Chin Mo. Chin Mo's eyes were dark. He stared at her and said gently, "Sleep for a while. You haven't slept for a few days." Hee-hwan usually didn't talk to him, but she said, "I can't sleep, and I don't want to sleep." Seeing that she was finally willing to talk to him for a while, Chin Mo's expression became much gentler. "Then I'll accompany you." Without waiting for her to agree, he lay down beside her and pulled her into his arms. Hee-hwan's body was very stiff because he had covered her with the blanket. It was dark in front of her. Their breaths were messed up and they couldn't be distinguished. Hee-hwan pulled the blanket and wanted to get out, but he didn't let her and pressed her down. In the darkness, his eyes were very bright. His voice was also hoarse under the blanket. "You really won't forgive me." He placed his fingers on the place where their second child had been and comforted her gently. Hee-hwan's eyes became hot. She wanted to cry. And he also realized that he was very cunning and knew her pain point. He pressed her little head against his heart and stayed with her, letting her cry. Even though they were no longer together, they were still the child's biological parents. Hee-hwan cried for a long time. Eventually, because there was not enough air, he pulled the blanket away. Her face was buried in his chest, making it wet and hot. It was very uncomfortable, but he did not care. Chin Mo thought that no matter how uncomfortable he was, he would not let go of her. But he was afraid that the tighter he held it, the faster it would loosen. The nurse came over to take his temperature. She opened the door and was stunned for a moment. Then, she closed the door and left. After crying for a while, Hee-hwan fell asleep. Chin Mo lowered his head to look at her tear-stained face. He reached out to gently wipe away her tears and kissed her face. He closed his eyes as well. He felt that it had been a long time since he had been this close to her. When Hehuan woke up again, it was almost noon. She had been eating with Qin Mo for the past few days, so she couldn't reject him even if she wanted to. However, during lunch, she whispered, Yihuan has been, I'll get your mom to take care of Yihuan this month, Qin Mo said. The reason why he asked Su Qing to take care of Yihuan was because he was afraid that Yihuan would miss the child and feel uncomfortable seeing his mother. After Qin Mo said that, Yihuan froze for a moment. She wasn't stupid and knew what he meant. He wanted to redeem himself. She said in a low voice, Qin Mo, we've redeemed ourselves so many times. This time, I really don't want to continue. I don't have the courage to do it anymore. Their love was already very painful. Chapter 43-98. Qin Mo stared at her and frowned, but he didn't say anything. There was silence between them. After a long while, he said in a low voice, it's not up to you to decide whether to continue or not. Yihuan didn't even have the strength to get angry. After eating, she climbed onto the bed and continued to stay there. Qin Mo frowned. I'll go out with you. Yihuan turned her face away and said in a low voice, I don't want to go out. She didn't want to, and he didn't force her. He just accompanied her. After a few days, it was time for Yihuan to be discharged. Qin Mo helped her with her luggage, and she couldn't refuse. After getting into the car, Yihuan wanted to go back to her apartment, but Qin Mo took her to his apartment. She refused to get out of the car and sat in the car. I want to go back to my apartment. Qin Mo looked at her. Isn't this your home? She looked down. It hasn't been for a long time. Qin Mo's eyes darkened. He reached out to grab Yihuan's hand and opened the door to get out of the car. Yihuan refused and struggled. In the end, Yihuan cried out in pain. She had stretched her wound. Qin Mo's eyes darkened. In the end, he carried her and walked towards the elevator. Yihuan was afraid of falling, so she hugged his neck and lowered her head without saying anything. Qin Mo's voice was hoarse. I'll let you go in a month. Yihuan looked up at him. She couldn't believe it. Qin Mo smiled bitterly. You don't believe me. Yihuan didn't say anything and just looked down. Qin Mo carried her back to the apartment. The furniture had been changed a lot, and it was in Yihuan's favorite style. It was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort. There was no auntie at home, just the two of them. So when Qin Mo put her down, Yihuan felt a little awkward. You must be tired. Do you want to lie on the bed? Qin Mo squatted in front of her and asked gently as he took off her coat. Yihuan leaned against the back of the sofa. I want to sit here for a while. He looked at her for a moment and went to the bedroom to get a blanket. He covered her with it and brought a magazine over. Take a look at this. I'll heat up a glass of milk for you. He was about to go to the kitchen when Yihuan stopped him. Qin Mo, he paused. Yihuan's voice was very soft. It's useless. We're done. Qin Mo's body stiffened. He didn't say anything and went straight to the kitchen to heat up the milk. He took care of her personally and cooked lunch for her. He even carried her to the bedroom to let her sleep. After she fell asleep, he went to the study to deal with work. Yihuan didn't know how busy he was. Other than taking care of her in the condominium, he was in the study. Sometimes, he would smoke on the balcony. If he saw her come out, he would immediately extinguish the cigarette. Yihuan wanted to pour a glass of water, but the glass in her hand was empty. She was wearing a set of home clothes, which made her look fluffy and cute in the middle of the night. He hadn't seen her so soft in a long time. Let me do it, he said in a hoarse voice. He took the glass from her and walked towards the kitchen. He Huan stood where she was and waited. She turned around and looked out the window. Qin Mo's condominium was on the top floor. It was a few hundred square meters and was huge. It was very empty even for two people. It was almost Chinese New Year. Even though the condominium had floor heating and was very warm, the night sky seemed cold when she looked outside. He Huan looked at it quietly. She felt a little cold and could not help but hug herself. Chapter 43-99. Qin Mo turned around and saw her standing in front of the French window with her arms around herself. He went over and put the glass in her hand. His voice was hoarse. "What are you looking at?" He Huan stood there, not looking at him but still looking outside. After a long time, she muttered, "I'm not looking at anything." She tilted her head. "Qin Mo, my movie is about to be released. I have to promote it," and, before she finished, he interrupted her. "Qin Chen is taking care of Rongyu." He Huan's eyes froze. She didn't say anything for a long time. She didn't explain. In the end, Qin Mo broke the silence. His voice was a little tired. "What do I have to do for you to forgive me?" He touched his forehead with his fingers. "There won't be anyone else in the future." He Huan smiled and then murmured, "I don't care anymore, Qin Mo." Then she looked down. "We're already like this. Let's let each other go. I just want to live a good life alone in the future." Qin Mo's face was cold. "Alone? What about me? You can find Suilio, Ai Jia, or any other woman. You can have as many children as you want." He Huan's voice was choked with sobs. She couldn't let it go. The pain that day would probably be a pain for the rest of her life. Qin Mo stared at her and smiled bitterly. "He Huan, you're right. You've thought about it many times." He suddenly turned around and went into the study without looking back. The door was slammed shut. She knew that he was angry. But she didn't care. He Huan stood in front of the French window and drank a glass of water slowly. Then she returned to the master bedroom. She was really weak. She fell asleep after a while. When she fell asleep, she felt that someone was standing by the bed. She opened her eyes and saw that it was Qin Mo. The light in the master bedroom was very dim. Qin Mo's eyes were also fixed on her. He Huan looked at him quietly. Her breathing became a little difficult. After a long time, Qin Mo finally unbuttoned his shirt and walked to the bathroom. He Huan heaved a sigh of relief. She closed her eyes and heard the sound of running water coming from the bathroom. She was so tired that she almost fell asleep again. However, when Qin Mo came out of the bathroom, she suddenly opened her eyes. Qin Mo stood in front of the bed in a bathrobe. He Huan was a little scared. For the past few days, they had been sleeping in separate rooms. What did he mean by that? Qin Mo pulled back the quilt and lay down beside her. He said in a low voice, "From today on, we'll sleep together." "I don't want to." He Huan bit her lip and moved to the side. "I'll sleep in the guest room." She tried to leave, but he pulled her back, and she fell into his arms. Qin Mo hugged her and pressed his face against her hair. "Don't move. Be good. Just hug me like this for a while." He Huan wanted to struggle, but his deep voice rang out, "You'd better not, He Huan. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I won't do something." She dared not move, but she hated him. Tears fell one by one, as if her heart had been corroded. No matter how sad she was to reject him, he still didn't let her go. He kissed her carefully. He Huan bit her lip and didn't move. Her body was also stiff. Everything showed that she hated him, was afraid of him, and rejected him. When Qin Mo let go of her, he closed his eyes slightly. He Huan. Do you think that I don't feel anything? No. She turned her back and bit her lip. So, then I'll hug you until I feel something. His voice was hoarse, but there was a hint of dominance in it. Chapter 4400. Of course, Qin Mo wouldn't do anything to her. He just kissed her and hugged her, stubbornly wanting to sleep with her, as if he wanted to prove something. Or as if he wanted to prove that they were still husband and wife. Huan kept silent with her back to him. They stayed like this for a long time. She couldn't reject him, but he didn't want to give up, so they stayed like this. Neither of them wanted to take a step back or take a step forward. In the hospital, Rong Yu's condition fluctuated. Qin Chen didn't want to extract his bone marrow until the last step because his body was already weak and he was afraid of rejection. Rong Yu was definitely suffering from conservative treatment. Huan also went to the hospital to visit him. Of course, she was always accompanied by bodyguards. She could not escape from Qin Mo's control, and she was too weak to do so. She was surprised that Ai Meng didn't show up. She always thought that Ai Meng would show up. But she didn't. Ai Meng seemed to have disappeared. Huan didn't want to ask Rong Yu, afraid that he would overthink and worsen his condition. She checked on Rong Yu, who had taken the chauffeur's car back, and unexpectedly found Ai Meng in the garage. Huan paused and didn't get into the car immediately. Ai Meng came over but didn't say anything for a long time. Huan waited patiently. Ai Meng finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "How is he?" Huan wanted to say that he was fine, but she thought about it and said, "Not so good." "How?" Ai Meng's eyes widened. "Isn't Dr. Qin treating him? Isn't Dr. Qin the best?" Huan's expression was cold. "But Qin Chen isn't a god." Ai Meng's face turned pale. After a long time, she said in a low voice, "Director He, I know that you are close to Dr. Qin. Can you beg her to save Rong Yu? He is a good man. Rong Yu is my friend too. Of course I will help him. But whether he can live or not depends on himself." Huan said coldly, "If you care about him so much, why don't you take care of him yourself? Didn't you say that you would take care of him? Are you just saying that? Rong Yu has been looking for you for a long time." Huan was not a talkative person. Besides, she was not in a good mood and was in a bad situation, so it was rare for her to talk so much. After saying that, she got into the car, and the black house slowly drove away. Ai Meng was still standing there, watching quietly. After a long time, she retracted her gaze. His eyes were dry, as if something had blown into his eyes. She stood there for a very, very long time before moving her feet to walk outside. However, when she reached the exit, she stopped, her heart violently heaving. Huan said that Rong Yu had been looking for her for a long time, and Huan said that Rong Yu might not be able to live for long. Was there a need for her to hesitate? Even if he didn't have long to live, she still wanted to be with him. Ai Meng suddenly turned around and ran in the other direction like a madwoman. When she appeared at the door of Rong Yu's ward, her heart pounded even faster. He stretched out his hand and placed it flat against the door. After a long time, he gently knocked on it. Rong Yu's voice came from inside, as elegant and pleasant as before. At that moment, Ai Meng almost wanted to cry. At this moment, she suddenly realized how much she missed him. She missed him more than she thought. Unable to hold it in any longer, she reached out and pushed the door open. Rong Yu was leaning against the headboard with a notebook in his hand. He was writing something, and it seemed like he was writing a script. Chapter 44:01. He lowered his head and his eyes. Even though he looked a little pale, he was still good-looking. This was the first time Ai Meng Meng felt that he was good-looking. He was the kind of young man with a scholarly aura. Perhaps he wasn't like President Qin, who came from a noble background, but he had a different kind of temperament. Ai Meng Meng had been looking at him since she came in. When Rong Yu looked up, he seemed surprised but not surprised at all. His eyes were especially bright at this moment, and he didn't look like a patient at all. He stared at her and smiled. "You're here." Ai Meng Meng's heart thumped again. She felt a little embarrassed. She reached out and touched her hair. After a long time, she said softly, "I came to see you." Rong Yu was still looking at her. He asked her quietly, and then Ai Meng Meng bit her lip. "I want to take care of you." She mustered up her courage to say it. She didn't dare to look at him and only lowered her eyes, her long eyelashes trembling. Rong Yu looked at her and sighed. "Why didn't you come earlier?" She didn't understand what he meant, and she didn't know if he was rejecting or accepting. Her palm-sized face was hurt and cautious. Rong Yu sighed inwardly again. She had changed a lot. In the past, he remembered that she was very headstrong, but now she was a very ordinary girl. He didn't believe that she touched that thing, but she never said it. No one knew why. Rong Yu reached out to her. "Come here." "Ah," she said and looked at him. "What should I do if you don't come over? It might be very difficult for me to get out of bed now. Or do you want me to go over?" His voice was gentle, and there was only a faint blush on his pale face. Ai Meng Meng was afraid that he would really get out of bed, so she went over immediately. She stood beside the bed carefully and asked him carefully, "Is there anything I can do for you?" He was still sitting there quietly, and his voice was hoarse. "Come a little closer." Ai Meng Meng didn't suspect anything. She moved closer, but she felt that she was a little too close to him. Just as she was thinking about that, her lips were kissed by him. She moaned and stared at him with her eyes wide open. "Close your eyes," he murmured. "Close your eyes when you kiss." She didn't want to, but for some reason, she listened to him and closed her eyes. After a long time, Rong Yu finally let go of her. Their eyes met and he whispered, "I'll get a lawyer to come over tomorrow. We'll sign the marital agreement and get married." Marriage? Ai Meng Meng's heartbeat quickened again. She only wanted to take care of him and nothing else. Rong Yu's eyes stared at her lips. After a while, he said softly, "Are you afraid that I won't live, so you don't want to marry me? Or do you not like me? Or are you afraid that I'll drag you down in the future?" Of course, Ai Meng Meng immediately retorted, "It's not like that." "What kind is it?" He looked at her, his eyes burning. Ai Meng Meng bit her lower lip and said in a small voice, "I'm willing to marry you and take care of you." Rong Yu smiled. When he smiled, he looked very handsome. He said yes. After that, he didn't say anything else and continued to write his script. Ai Meng Meng didn't dare to disturb him, so she passed him a glass of water. Later, when she saw that he was still writing after an hour, she couldn't help but say, "Do you want to take a break?" Chapter 44:02. He looked at her. "Are you concerned about me?" She was usually very strong, but she was a little speechless at this moment. She couldn't find a reply for a long time, so she just nodded gently. Rong Yu smiled and continued to write. As he typed on the keyboard, he asked her casually, "Do you like being an actress?" Ai Meng Meng was a little embarrassed by his question. She pursed her lips and said after a long time, "It's all right, I don't really want to be one anymore." Yu didn't say anything, but his hands slowed down a little. Then, he seemed to think of something and looked at her. "If you want to act, you can tell me. This script isn't for sale. Maybe you can let Hee-hwan do it. If she can do it, I think you can do it too." He just said it like that. Meng Meng didn't take it seriously because she was really sick. Even if she could do it, she might not be able to sell it. Now, she had zero tolerance for actors. Yu looked at her again and whispered, "It's a documentary. It can be shown with positive energy." She nodded and looked at him. "Then when are you going to rest?" Yu smiled and passed the notebook to her after saving it. Meng Meng closed it for him and put it aside. She was probably from an ordinary family, so she was very good at taking care of people. She helped him put down the bed and tidied it up. She leaned against his pillow and said, "Go to sleep. I'll wake you up for lunch." Yu was a little tired after working for a while, so he closed his eyes and grunted. Meng Meng wanted to move away, but the next second, he held her hand. Because Yu was sick, his fingers were a little cold, but Meng Meng's hand was warm. Strangely, the temperature was harmonious. She bit her lips and looked at him, a little helpless. They had actually done it before, the kind that was thorough, but now she still felt a little helpless. Although it was just holding hands. Meng Meng bit her lips and said softly, "Yu." His eyes were still closed, and his voice was a little low. "I want to sleep for a while. Stay with me." He was clearly very weak, but he still pulled her to his side with one hand. Meng Meng was forced to stick to his chest. Compared to the last time, he was much thinner than he was. Even his heartbeat was not as strong. Meng Meng suddenly wanted to cry, but she was afraid that he would know, so she secretly held it back. Yu seemed to have sensed something. He reached out and gently touched her face. Then he asked out gently, "Why are you crying?" "I'm not crying." Meng Meng bit her lip. "It's just that the sand got into my eyes." He smiled bitterly. "How can there be sand in a ward? It's scary to be uneducated. I have a junior high school graduate, but after attending technical secondary school for a year, he quit." Meng Meng said, somewhat unconvinced. Yu burst into laughter. "You call this cultured? I'll teach you when I have time." As he spoke, he placed her fingers in his palm and said in a hoarse voice, "Sleep with me for a while. I've been waiting for you for many days. You must not know the taste of suffering." He closed his eyes, and she opened them stealthily. He was thin and weak, but he was still good-looking. It seemed that as he got sick, he became less and less similar to President Qin. Yu was Yu, not someone else. She was also sure that she liked him, not someone else. She stayed with him and waited for him to fall asleep, but she still cried secretly. She was afraid that she would wake him up, so her voice was soft. Later, she desperately wiped her tears. That kind of pain was even worse than the storm that time. It was like fine needles stabbing into her heart. Chapter 4403. The door of the ward was pushed open. The nurses outside were surprised to see the scene in the ward. Why was there a girl? But they soon realized that the girl had been crying and trying her best to hold it in. She looked very pitiful. She must love Yu very much. The door closed again. Meng Meng finally stopped crying. She lay beside him carefully and looked at his face. Yu suddenly said, "You're a grown-up. It'll be embarrassing if you cry." She opened her eyes and looked at him on the pillow. How can I sleep with you crying like this? He smiled and closed his eyes again. I really don't know if you're here to accompany me or to torture me. Ai Meng Meng bit her lip and said softly, I'll leave if you don't like it. He pulled her close and kissed her, staring at her. At such a close distance, she could almost see his eyelashes. His eyelashes were very deep, so his eyes looked very gentle. Ai Meng Meng wanted to cry again. He was so good and she had done so many wrong things. Could she really do that? Rongyu guessed what she was thinking and whispered, Didn't you say you would take care of me? She looked up at him. Rongyu smiled. That's enough. In the end, they slept together. In the afternoon, when Qin Chen came over, she was surprised to see Ai Meng Meng. As a doctor and Auntie Huan, she naturally knew Ai Meng Meng and often gave Ai Meng Meng acupuncture treatment. She couldn't help but be surprised to see them. Why were the two of them together? However, Qin Chen didn't show it. After the examination, she went back to the office and called Qin Mo. Qin Mo picked up the phone and was congratulated by Qin Chen. Qin Mo was speechless. Why should I congratulate you? He and He Huan had just lost a child, and He Huan ignored him as if he was her enemy. It was good that he wasn't surprised. How could he be happy? Qin Chen coughed and said, Your rival in love is getting married. Rongyu and Ai Meng Meng are getting married tomorrow. Qin Mo was surprised. Were they really together? And so fast. Qin Chen's voice was a little faint. Brother, I know you have feelings for Ai Meng Meng, and so do I. But I don't think this girl is that bad. Besides, she won't get close to Yi Huan in the future. Let her go. When have I ever been unwilling to let her go? Qin Mo's voice was even fainter than hers, and then he added, I have to congratulate them on their marriage. Qin Chen coughed again. After a long time, he said, Brother, why do I feel that your words are sour? Don't you wish them well? Qin Mo's answer was to hang up the phone. He couldn't be bothered to talk to his sister. Putting down the phone, he smoked a cigarette and took out his phone to call He Huan. However, after thinking about it, he decided against it. That night, he went to socialize and returned a little late. When he returned, He Huan was already asleep. Qin Mo took off his jacket in the dark and threw it on the sofa. Then, he walked into the master bedroom. It was also dark in the master bedroom. In the past month, He Huan had never waited for him at the door. Qin Mo sat on the side of the bed, which was soft and big, and there was a deep corner of the bed. He smelled of cigarettes, alcohol, and even women's perfume. He Huan woke up keenly. She was shocked and immediately looked at him with her eyes wide open. In the dark, they faced each other. Chapter 4404. Qin Mo sat on the side of the bed. The soft bed was sunken in, and he smelled of cigarettes, alcohol, and even women's perfume. He Huan woke up, she woke up and opened her eyes. And he was right in front of her. He Huan pursed her lips and didn't make a sound. Her entire body was tense, and she didn't know what Qin Mo wanted to do. Qin Mo's fingers caressed her face, and his voice was hoarse. I know you're still awake, He Huan. He paused for a moment, and his voice became deeper and hoarser. Don't you want to know where I went? It has nothing to do with me, she said softly, and then she sat up. The lights came on, and their eyes met. After a long time, Qin Mo said, even if there was someone else, you wouldn't care, right? He Huan didn't want to hear that, and she wanted to escape. However, his hands quickly clenched into fists, and he pressed them against the headboard to prevent her from escaping. She was completely trapped in his arms. He Huan pursed her lips and closed her eyes slightly. What do you want to do? Let's talk. His voice was hoarse. Suilio and I were never what you think we are. He Huan couldn't escape, and she could only look at him. I never liked her. He stared into her eyes. He Huan, did you hear that? I've never liked any other woman. Don't force yourself to think too much. He Huan chuckled. I didn't think too much, and I won't think too much. President Qin, don't add more drama to yourself. We're divorced a long time ago, and we have nothing to do with each other. Losing the child is expected. He stared at her, and he looked a little scary. He Huan smiled bitterly. Do you have any other questions, President Qin? If not, I'm going to sleep. And don't forget that you said you'd let me go. Chapter 4402, You Can't Go. Chapter 4405. After he said that, He Huan didn't say anything else. They lay there quietly. No one said anything, and no one wanted to do anything. They just lay there. Just like that, the whole night. Early in the morning, He Huan was still lying there, but Qin Mo had already gotten up. He was putting on a shirt with his back to her. His figure was tall and slender, which was very attractive. Sometimes He Huan found it strange. He didn't work out on purpose, and he often had social engagements, but his muscles were very good. She just didn't know that he had the best fitness equipment in his office. It wasn't that he didn't exercise. He Huan looked at him and wanted to look away, but Qin Mo had already turned around and his eyes fell on her face. You're awake. He Huan didn't say anything, as if she didn't want to talk to him. This was also the norm for the past month. Qin Mo walked over and bent down to look at He Huan. She opened her eyes. What's the matter? His attitude was cold. Qin Mo smiled lightly again. I'm going on a business trip for 2 days. Do you want to go with me? I want to stay at home. She closed her eyes again. She had no interest in going on a business trip with him. In fact, she had no interest in Qin Mo. She seemed to have become more indifferent after the miscarriage. She might have been grateful for what Qin Mo had done for her in the past, but now she didn't feel anything at all. As He Huan thought to herself, she felt a warm touch on her lips. She opened her eyes. She saw Qin Mo. He Huan was stunned. After a few seconds, she said hoarsely, Qin Mo. This is not appropriate. Why is it not appropriate? We've kissed many times before. He said hoarsely. He Huan turned her face away. We're not husband and wife anymore. Can't a husband and wife kiss? He chuckled. Many unmarried men and women have children. He didn't mean it when he said it, but when he finished, he regretted it. Then, he saw her face slowly turn pale. When he felt that she was about to leave, he quickly pressed her head with his fingers and said in a low voice, He Huan, I didn't mean it. As he spoke, he stared at her eagerly. He Huan looked down and said in a hoarse voice, whether it was intentional or not, the child is gone. Qin Mo, can you let go? Still holding her chin, he kept his hand on her shoulder for a long time. After a long time, he bent one of his long legs and said in a particularly hoarse voice, Do you really want to leave me? He Huan bit her lower lip. Yes. Qin Mo stared at her for a long time. Then he smiled and backed away. He stood up straight and said in a particularly hoarse voice, If you want to leave, I'll remove all the bodyguards when I'm on a business trip. He Huan, do as you see fit. If you don't love me at all, don't want to be with me at all, and don't care about our past relationship, then leave. After he finished speaking, he looked deeply at her, and there was a trace of longing in his eyes. As soon as Huan was freed from his restraints, she gently sat up. She was wearing pure white pajamas, and her black hair had reached her shoulders. Because she had just had a miscarriage, she was a little thinner. Her face was the size of a palm, and her chin was sharp and thin. Qin Emo looked at her and thought that Huan seemed to be very different from the current Huan half a year ago. She was so fragile now, and he couldn't describe how she felt. Chapter 4406. She was so fragile now. She couldn't tell how she felt. Huan just said okay. And this word, for Qin Emo, was like the last piece of driftwood that sank. He just looked at her quietly, not saying anything. Just looked at her. Then, he smiled bitterly, took his coat and walked out. He did not say anything else. As for Huan, she just sat there quietly and listened as he walked out. The door closed softly. It was as if the door between her and Qin Emo had been closed. In her heart, it was as if some line of defense had collapsed. The flood of memories surged forward, suppressing her and causing her great pain. She was free. They had broken up. But in the face of freedom, she was not happy at all. They could have ended it peacefully. At this moment, Huan heard the sound of a car outside. It should be Qin Emo leaving. She didn't know why, but she still left the bed and walked to the French window. From here, she could see everything below. Qin Mo's car left, and the bodyguards also got in the car and left. Huan knew that she could leave. But she didn't move. She stood there motionlessly. Later, when she felt a little suffocated, she turned around and looked around quietly. Everything here was the same as before. Nothing had been moved. In this apartment, Huan and Qin Emo had quarreled and occasionally had sweet moments. And all of this made her heart ache when she thought of it now. She closed her eyes and was alone for a long time before she walked back to the master bedroom. She pulled her suitcase, packed her things briefly, and then went downstairs. The servants were still there. Seeing that Huan was going out, they were stunned. "Madam." Huan bit her lower lip. "I talked to President Qin. Thank you for taking care of me during this time." Huan's words were polite but also very distant. The servant still wanted to say something, but Huan said again, "There's no need to say anything. The bodyguards here have all been withdrawn. It's the same whether we call or not." The servants looked and found that it was true. During this time, Huan had already walked out with her luggage. There was a car she used to drive in the parking lot, so she got in and drove away. After Huan drove away, Qin Emo sat in the black limousine and received a call. The person on the other end said something, and then he was stunned for a moment before he said in a low voice, "I got it." His hand that was holding the phone dropped, but his fingers were still tightly gripping the phone. He didn't loosen his grip. His brows were tightly furrowed, and they did not relax at all. Huan left just as he was about to leave. Qin Emo leaned against the back of the chair and closed his eyes. His facial features were as tense as a world of ice and snow. In the end, she still left without any reluctance. He turned around and left. Later on, Qin Emo fell sick. He was pitiful and weak, and no one was around to take care of him. He sometimes wondered why he had bothered to be like this, when he had loved her from childhood and she had a heart of stone. Every time, he wanted to be ruthless and let it go, but he couldn't make up his mind. And this time, it was the same. Perhaps he had already decided that he would never let her off in this lifetime. Why did he let her off? She had been his since she was a child. In the future, she would be his, and only his. Qin Mo's fingers slowly loosened, and he moved slightly. Then his eyes opened slowly. This time, there was a touch of dominance in his eyes. Chapter 4407. He made a phone call and casually said a few words. The content was a little ruthless, and this phone call changed the fate of many people. But it couldn't be helped. Qin Mo was the most powerful man in the entertainment industry, and he had the final say in many things. Including He Huan's parents' cultural company, Rongyu Studio, and whether He Huan's movie could be released. He had too many tricks up his sleeve. Qin Mo hung up the phone and closed his eyes. City B. When He Huan left to pick up Yi Huan was not at her mother's place. Su Cheng's expression was also very strange. She looked at He Huan and sighed. Then she reached out to stroke her hair and said in a low voice, He Huan, it depends on whether you can let go of everything. She paused for a moment and said in a low voice, let's go abroad to relax. He Huan was still looking at her mother. Mom, what about Yi Huan? I will take her with me even if I go abroad. My movie is going to be released, and I can't leave. I also have to take care of Rongyu. He Huan. As a mother, Su Cheng had always loved He Huan very much, but this time, she spoke to her in a strict voice, can you take care of yourself? Don't worry about anything else. Her tone was really strict. He Huan looked at her and asked slowly, Mom, did something happen? Where is Yi Huan? Is she at Qin Mo's house? Su Cheng's expression was a little strange. She looked at He Huan and said in a low voice after a long time, Yi Huan is not at the Qin family. She is at Yi Mubai's house. Yi Mubai. Wen Yuan's house. He Huan was stunned and couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. After a while, she murmured, why was she sent to the Yi family? Su Cheng looked at her and said very softly, not only did Qin Mo send Yi Huan to the Yi family, but he also suppressed Rongyu Studio and your father's cultural company. Did you even care about your movie? Will it be screened in half a month? He Huan was still in a daze and did not come to his senses for a long time. Qin Mo wants you to return to his side, Su Cheng said calmly. He Huan, his gaze was a little straight as he stared at his mother. Finally, she said softly, Mom, I understand. She turned and walked away. Su Cheng stopped her. He Huan, where are you going? He Huan stopped and turned her back to Su Cheng. Su Cheng lowered her voice. Are you looking for Qin Mo? I won't let you go, do you hear me? He Huan's body was somewhat stiff. After a long while, she said in a low voice, I want to ask him why he treats me like this. Don't go. You can't beat him. He Huan, I'd rather you give up everything and leave him. Do you understand? Su Cheng's voice was harsher than before. He Huan stood there for a while longer before walking out quickly. After all, she had just had a miscarriage and was not in good health. Her body swayed a little when she moved. With much difficulty, she steadied herself and reached out to hold on to the door. Turning her head, she looked at Su Cheng and said softly, Mom, I will definitely look for him. But He Huan couldn't find Qin Mo. She couldn't get through to him at all. When he didn't want her to find him, he would make sure that she couldn't find him. He Huan looked for Secretary He. Chapter 4408. Secretary He thought to himself that President Qin was letting He Huan chase after him. President Qin was so arrogant. He Huan had just recovered. How could he run around? While Secretary He was thinking about this, He Huan had already hung up. Although it was difficult, she still found the location of Qin Mo's hotel in Hong Kong and set off immediately. She didn't even go to look for Yi Huan because she knew that without Qin Mo's permission, Yi Huan wouldn't come back. She immediately flew to Hong Kong. Xing Yuan Hospital Ward in B City. Rong Yu received treatment early in the morning. He didn't let Ai Meng Meng accompany him because he was afraid that she would be scared and hurt if she saw the scene. When he came out of the treatment room, his already pale face became even paler. He was pushed back in a wheelchair by a nurse. When he came back, there was another lawyer in the room besides Ai Meng Meng. Although Rong Yu was weak, he still nodded. Lawyer Li usually dealt with Rong Yu's copyright issues, but he didn't expect Rong Yu to ask him to draft a prenuptial agreement. When he saw the email, he was a little surprised. This was a completely unfair agreement. Rong Yu gave almost all of his assets to Ai Meng Meng. If Ai Meng Meng had any ideas in the future, he didn't dare to think about it. He tried to persuade Rong Yu, but Rong Yu said that he wouldn't change his mind. Fine, artistic youths were willful like this. At this moment, Rong Yu nodded at him and looked at Ai Meng Meng. Have you shown her the agreement? He was very weak, but he persisted in finishing the job. Ai Meng Meng's eyes were filled with helplessness and uneasiness. She said in a small voice, Rong Yu, I don't need you to do this for me. He smiled weakly and warmly, but it was also a beautiful smile. You'll leave me after you take the money. I won't. Ai Meng Meng immediately said in a nervous manner. Rong Yu smiled happily and nodded at Lawyer Li. Let's sign it. As Rong Yu's employee, Lawyer Li added, have you thought it through? Rong Yu didn't reply and only smiled slightly. Lawyer Li then handed him the document for him to sign. He signed it without looking at it and pushed it to Ai Meng Meng. Ai Meng Meng held the pen and looked at him. Her eyes were a little confused, but she didn't sign it. Rong Yu waited patiently, but Lawyer Li was not calm. Where else can you find such a good thing? Rong Yu's net worth was already tens of millions, and as long as he could survive, his future would be bright. Ai Meng Meng looked at Rong Yu again before biting her lip and lowering her head to sign. That's right. Lawyer Li put away the documents. Here are the certificates and photos. I'll handle it for you. I'll be able to get the marriage certificate tomorrow. I wish you a blissful life together. Rong Yu smiled faintly. 100 years of love. Would he have another 100 years? He married Ai Meng Meng because he wanted to take care of her and let her own property legally. He didn't have any relatives left, and she was the only one he was worried about. Once upon a time, he was also worried about another girl, but that girl had a lot of things, so he didn't feel pity for her. Ai Meng Meng was different. She really had nothing. Chapter 4409. Because they were the same kind of people. They had no family in this world and were very lonely. After Lawyer Li left, Rong Yu couldn't take it anymore. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He said in a low voice, help me to the bed. Actually, the nurse wanted to go forward, but Rong Yu looked at Ai Meng Meng and said, help me up. Ai Meng Meng was stunned for a moment, but she still went forward to support him according to his wishes. She laboriously helped him onto the bed. She wanted to leave, but Rong Yu grabbed her hand and said, wait a minute. Ai Meng Meng looked at him and pursed her lips. Don't you want to rest? Rong Yu's gaze fell on her face. After a long time, he said in a low voice, I have something for you. She looked at him. Rong Yu sat on the bed and took out a small but exquisite box from under the pillow. He opened it and there was a diamond ring with a pink diamond on it. It wasn't big, but it was beautiful. Rong Yu held it and looked up at Ai Meng Meng. His voice was even hoarser. I prepared it a long time ago. I didn't know when you would come. Ai Meng Meng looked at the diamond ring and actually wanted to retreat. She stared at him but retracted her hand. Yu was extremely weak, but at this moment, she did not know where he got the strength from, but he suddenly grabbed her hand and slowly pulled it towards him. Meng wanted to break free, but he didn't allow it. She was pulled over. She bit her lip and said nervously, Yu. An engagement ring, he said in a low voice. You should be more careful about getting married. As he spoke slowly, he slipped the ring onto her slender finger. Her hand was very white and slender, and it looked very beautiful when she wore it. Yu stared at it for a while before finally holding her hand and gently kissing it. Meng felt a warmth on the back of her hand. She was in a daze for a while before she asked him softly, why? Yu let go of her hand and slowly lay down on the bed. After lying flat for a long time, he said, because I like it. Is that reason enough? She was stunned for a moment. Then she pursed her lips and said in a hoarse voice, I'm not worth it. Whether it's worth it or not is up to me. How can you decide for me? Yu looked at her, then held her hand and closed his eyes gently. I'm a little tired, I want to sleep for a while. He seemed to have fallen asleep, but after a minute, he continued, when I'm discharged, we'll have a wedding. Meng looked at him with his eyes closed. There was some pain on his face, and her heart also tightened. The nurse covered him with a blanket and said softly, Mr. Rong's chemotherapy is very painful. He's forcing himself to endure it. Miss Ai, please treat him well. When Meng heard this, she felt like crying. She didn't know what was wrong with her, but she felt like crying. Later, when he fell asleep, she kept watching over him. She flipped through his medical records over and over again. Later, she went to beg Qin Chen, but Qin Chen was still indifferent. He only said that his illness was quite serious. Meng was like a fried fish. In the end, Yu woke up. When he heard what Qin Chen said, he felt angry and amused. He was annoyed and amused at the same time. He also felt a tinge of heartache as he looked at Qin Chen. I'll talk to her for a bit. Qin Chen was in a good mood. He smiled and said, then I'll go out first. Oh yes, I heard that you're married. Congratulations. Chapter 44:10. Yu looked at Qin Chen with disapproval. Qin Chen was cynical to everyone, but he couldn't bear to hurt Yu because he looked like Qin Mo. Although he didn't look like him anymore, she was still a little afraid of him. Qin Chen went out. Yu looked at Meng again. She immediately stopped being sad and asked him if he was still in pain. Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her concern. He looked at her and said, do you think I'm going to die soon? Dr. Qin said it's not easy to cure your illness, Meng said honestly. Yu still looked at her and didn't say anything. Then, he smiled and said, if you want to know, you can ask me directly. Dr. Qin is good at playing tricks on people. Yu used a more elegant way, but Meng still didn't understand. Isn't a doctor a sacred profession? Yes, but Dr. Qin isn't a serious person. Yu sighed. But it's normal for you to be tricked. Meng was still in shock. After a long time, she murmured, but Huan also said that you have an incurable disease. It's very difficult to cure it. She hesitated to say the last few words. Yu pretended to be unhappy. If I recover from my illness, will you not be with me anymore? No. She was a little flustered. She bit her lips and didn't say anything for a long time. Then, she looked at Yu again. He was still calm and collected. Meng was a little anxious. She pulled his hand and said in a low voice, that's not what I meant. Rong Yu looked at her carefully. His eyes were red, and so was his little face. He felt a little sorry for her, but there was a gentle smile on his face. I believe you. Ai Mingming's lips trembled slightly. She stared at him for a long time as if he was poisonous. Then, she suddenly pushed him away and walked to the window. She stood there, her heart rising and falling because of her emotions. Her face was full of pain. After a long time, she said in a trembling voice, Rong Yu, you don't know anything. What do you know? Rong Yu's voice was a little low, which was different from his usual tone. It sounded like he was talking to his lover. Ai Mengmeng suddenly turned her head and stared into his eyes. Very slowly, she said, do you know about my past? Before I got together with you, I was almost, actually. Don't say it. Rong Yu stopped her, his voice almost stern. It's not your fault. Ai Mingming's expression was somewhat stupefied. After a long time, she repeated in a low voice, it's not my fault. This time, Rong Yu's tone was more certain. Of course it's not your fault. His body was weak, but he persevered and walked towards her step by step. As for her, she could only bite her lips and look at him. Her body could not help but take a step back, as if she was afraid, but also as if she was looking forward to it, until he came to her side. Rong Yu stretched out his fingers and stroked her face gently. His voice was a lot hotter. Look forward to the future. Don't think about the past. It's already in the past, unless that scumbag is still fine and hasn't been punished. Ai Mingming's eyes were filled with tears. She bit her lips and said, he's in jail and hasn't been released yet. Rong Yu reached out and pulled her into his arms. He was very thin and weak, but he persevered and gave her the warmth that a husband should have. At this moment, he was all that she could rely on. He thought that he would live on well because he had something to worry about. Chapter 44:11. At the same time. Hong Kong. Hehuan's visit to Qin Mo didn't go well. She went to the hotel where Qin Mo was staying but still didn't see him. Following Qin Mo wasn't Secretary He, but another male assistant. Hehuan didn't see Qin Mo, only his assistant, Su Li. Su Li didn't see Hehuan often, but everyone in King Entertainment knew how important she was to Qin Mo. There was a reason why she wasn't seen. For this reason, Su Li felt that Boss Qin was sick, and very sick. Su Li saw Hehuan. She looked a little haggard after the flight. Director He, President Qin went to the station today and will probably be back tonight. Do you want to wait in President Qin's suite or get another one? Su Li asked after some thought. President Qin had said Hehuan would come before he left, but President Qin didn't say what the arrangements were. He could only watch. Hehuan sat quietly on the sofa, listening to Su Li. She asked tiredly, what time will Qin Mo be back? Su Li thought about it and told her, President Qin should be back at 11 p.m. He will be attending a banquet in the station. Hehuan sat on the sofa, her voice soft. I'll wait for him here. Su Li frowned. It's very cold. Although there's heating in the lobby, it's still very cold at night. Director He, do you want to consider it? No, I'll wait for him here, Hehuan said quietly. In fact, she came in a hurry and didn't have any luggage. Su Li looked at Hehuan. He wanted to say something, but he sighed. He called Qin Mo and explained the situation. Qin Mo paused for a moment and said calmly, let's do what she wants. He hung up. Su Li found it strange. It didn't make sense. Didn't President Qin dote on Miss He the most? Could President Qin bear to leave her in such cold weather? But no matter what, He Huan was frozen outside the lobby. Although it was 20 degrees Celsius, it was still very cold when the door was opened and closed and people came in and out. She hadn't eaten much the whole day, and by 8 o'clock in the evening, her stomach was already very uncomfortable, but she still endured it. By the time Qin Mo came back, He Huan's stomach was already very uncomfortable. He didn't come back alone. Beside him was Su Ilio, his female companion for the banquet. When they passed by the lobby, Su Ilio looked at He Huan and then at Qin Mo. Qin Mo stood still and stared at He Huan with his black eyes. He Huan was sitting on the sofa, wearing a white down jacket. Her head was leaning against the back of the sofa, and her eyes were closed as if she was asleep. Qin Mo looked at her quietly. After a while, he said to Su Ilio, "Go back to your room." Just then, He Huan woke up. She stared at them standing together, then stood up. Because her stomach was uncomfortable, she put her hand on her stomach and said in a low voice, "Qin Mo, I have something to talk to you about. Is it convenient for you?" Qin Mo looked into her eyes and said, "You know what I mean." If that was the case, it would be tantamount to cutting off all her words. If she returned to his side, everything would go back to how it was. If she didn't want to, then the current situation would be worse in the future. Yi Huan would always be raised in the Yi family. "Qin Mo, what do you mean? Are you saying that if I don't go back, Yi Huan will marry into the Yi family? You've left her in the Yi family since she was young." He Huan held her breath. She couldn't believe what he was thinking. Chapter 44:12. Qin Mo said calmly. Then, his eyes lit up. "He Huan, we can both test each other's bottom line." He Huan was already very tired. She looked straight at him, not daring to believe what he was thinking. After a long time, Qin Mo said softly, "It's cold here. Follow me back to my room. I heard from Suli that you didn't get a room." He Huan was very angry. He knew everything. He knew that she was anxious and waiting for him here, but he still calmly attended the party with Su Ilio. He was a jerk. He Huan bit her lips and stared at him for a long time. Qin Mo also realized that she was not in a good state. She had been waiting for him here all day. She had arrived at noon. It had been almost 12 hours. She might not have eaten. He felt sorry for her, but he blamed her even more. He said it, but she didn't move. Qin Mo's expression was very unpleasant. He stared at her and said in a very low voice, "If you want to stay here, then stay here." As he spoke, he really started to walk away, looking like he was about to leave. He Huan was stunned. Qin Mo's secretary was a little surprised. President Qin loved He Huan the most and couldn't bear to see her suffer. Moreover, He Huan didn't seem to be in a good state. Su Ilio asked tentatively, "President Qin, this isn't a good idea, is it?" Qin Mo didn't look at her and walked in front of her. His actions were a little unreasonable and he didn't give Su Ilio any face. However, Qin Mo had always been a cold and aloof man. Other than following He Huan around as a bootlicker, he had never been nice to women. It was probably because of his previous gentleness that Su Ilio didn't realize her place and overstepped her boundaries. His behavior put Su Ilio in a difficult position. She glanced at He Huan and let out a sigh before taking her leave. Qin Mo's secretary was also about to leave, but he still lowered his voice and said, "Director He, please give in. President Qin has been in a bad mood for the past 2 days." He Huan pursed her lips. The secretary left. He Huan clenched her fists and walked toward Qin Mo. He stood in front of the elevator and waited. It was a special elevator for the presidential suite, so he was the only one standing there. His attitude was very impatient. Huan walked over slowly. When he heard the faint footsteps, he straightened his back slightly. Because he knew her too well, he could tell even the slightest sound was hers. Mo didn't want to turn his head, but he still turned his body slightly. It was indeed Huan. She walked towards him with a pale face. She didn't say anything and just stood beside him. Mo's attitude was still a bit cold. He gently stroked the cufflinks on his other sleeve and stared at her silently. You want to live with me? Huan pursed her lips. I want to talk to you. Mo retracted his gaze and looked at the numbers above. After a while, the elevator door opened with a ding. He went in first and then turned around to wait for Huan. She was stunned for a moment before she went in and stood beside Mo. He didn't say anything, and neither did she. The two of them used to be so close, but they had nothing to say when they were together. There were so many things to talk about, but the moment they opened their mouths, it would be hurt. Fortunately, the elevator soon reached the top floor. Mo turned sideways and gestured for her to go out first. It wasn't until then that he regained some of his poise. Chapter 44:13. Huan went out first and saw the door of the suite. Mo came from behind. He didn't go around to the front of her. Instead, he reached out and opened the door through her body. It looked like he was holding her in his arms. Huan was a little embarrassed. They had been intimate countless times, but she still felt uncomfortable when they weren't even touching. After her miscarriage, she didn't seem to be able to be intimate with him. At this time, her avoidance naturally made Mo a little uncomfortable. Mo's eyes were dyed with a layer of black ink. He silently looked at her and went in first. Huan followed behind him. He closed the door and looked down at her for a while. Then, he took off his jacket and walked over to call for food. I'm not hungry. Huan bit her lip. I want to talk to you about Huan, and I'm hungry. Mo stared at her and said coldly. With that said, he walked to the wine cabinet and took out a bottle of red wine. Then, he took out 2 glasses and poured one for himself and one for her. He didn't hand it to her, but held the glass and drank it slowly. Huan stood there and pursed her lips. She didn't say anything. They used to be husband and wife, but now they were frighteningly distant. In the end, it was Mo who spoke first. Take off your jacket and sit down to drink a glass of water. You're as pale as a ghost. Even if you want to do something to me, I don't think I have the appetite. Huan wanted to refute, but she held back. She did as he said. He put down the glass in his hand and poured her a glass of water. When he handed it to her, his fingers touched her palm. It was cold. Mo looked at her silently for a while. Then, he walked back to the bar and drank his red wine. It seemed that he wasn't satisfied. He lit a cigarette and took a puff. His cold expression finally seemed to soften a little. Perhaps he felt a little better. But after he took a few puffs, Huan coughed. Mo sat behind the bar and looked up at her. Did you catch a cold? Just these 3 words were enough to make people feel a little overwhelmed by the favor. Huan shook his head. Mo was still staring at her, but he put out his cigarette. Just then, there was a knock on the door. He got up to open it and pushed the dining cart in. The meal he ordered was very sumptuous. How was it a midnight snack? It was clearly dinner. Mo set the table and looked at Huan. Come and eat. She still wanted to say that she didn't want to eat, but Mo's expression was very ugly, so she could only sit down. The two of them didn't speak, they just ate together in silence. Qin Mo obviously didn't eat at the banquet. In fact, he didn't have a good appetite these days, so he ate quite a lot. He Huan was hungry and ate as much as a kitten. Do you not like to eat, or do you not like to eat with me? He looked at her quietly, as if he was in a difficult position. He Huan looked up at him, then lowered her head and continued eating. While thinking about some things, he ate a little fiercely and quickly. By the time her stomach was completely uncomfortable, her face was as white as a sheet. She covered her mouth and rushed to the bathroom. She vomited everything she had eaten, even her bile. Qin Mo walked over quickly. His hand hesitated for a moment, but he still put it on her shoulder. He also felt her body stiffen for a moment. He whispered, "What's wrong?" He Huan was still a little stiff. She bit her lip and whispered, "Maybe I caught a cold and ate too much. My stomach feels a little uncomfortable." Chapter 44:14. As she spoke, she took out a tissue to clean herself up and turned around to rest. Qin Mo had already picked her up and said in a hoarse voice, "Let me carry you." Before He Huan could react, he had already carried her to the master bedroom. He Huan was very weak. She bit her lip and hugged his neck in the end. Qin Mo put her on the soft bed and poured her a glass of warm water before calling the doctor. He Huan heard his call and struggled to sit up. "I'm fine. There's no need to call the doctor." Qin Mo looked at her coldly, then hung up the phone after he finished speaking. He looked at her and picked up the glass of water from the bedside table. "Why don't you drink?" He Huan looked down. "I don't want to." Qin Mo held her shoulders with one hand and put the glass to her lips with the other. His voice was short and strong. "Drink." He Huan looked at him in a daze. Qin Mo, but the water had already reached her. She was forced to drink half a glass and shook her head to show that she didn't want to drink anymore. Qin Mo put down the glass and helped her lie down. He Huan didn't feel well and lay down quietly. She was probably tired. It was already past midnight. She actually fell asleep. Qin Mo didn't continue eating. He looked at He Huan for a while and then walked to the French window. He looked at the night sky outside and looked down at his phone from time to time. He was still wearing the clothes he wore at the dinner party. He was so cold that any woman would be tempted by him, but not his ex-wife, He Huan. He wondered how cold-hearted she must be to turn a blind eye to him. She only remembered Yi Huan, her parents, and Rongyu. When had she ever cared about him? Qin Mo closed his eyes as he thought about it. When He Huan woke up, she was weak all over. She heard Qin Mo's deep and pleasant voice. He was probably afraid to wake her up, so he kept his voice low. He was asking the doctor about the precautions and the doctor was explaining patiently. He Huan woke up, but she couldn't face him, so she closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. Qin Mo was talking to the doctor when he inadvertently lowered his head to look at He Huan's face. He pursed his lips slightly and did not expose her. He only said a few more words to the doctor and sent him away. When he turned around again, he sat on the edge of the bed. "Since you're awake, get up and eat something. You've vomited out everything you ate earlier. Eat something light before taking the medicine." It was pointless for He Huan to continue pretending. He slowly opened his eyes. "What's wrong with me?" Qin Mo looked at her and reached for a bowl of red date porridge. He said in a low voice, "Sit up, I'll feed you." She was embarrassed. She propped herself up and felt a little dizzy. "I'll eat by myself." Qin Mo looked at her and didn't say anything. He Huan was even more embarrassed and could only let him feed her. She didn't have a good appetite, but this bowl of porridge was surprisingly soft and delicious. 10 minutes later, she finished the whole bowl. Chin-mo put the bowl back and opened the medicine box. He said in a low voice, "The doctor said that you don't pay attention to your meals. You're slightly anemic and malnourished." Hee-hwan was a little dazed as she listened. When she came back to her senses, the medicine was already in front of her. She was stunned for a moment and instinctively resisted. She was afraid of suffering since she was young. "Do you want me to feed you by myself?" Chin-mo's voice was hoarse. Hee-hwan understood what he meant by feed her by himself. Of course, she wouldn't let him feed her. She took the medicine hurriedly and popped it into her mouth. It was so bitter that her little face scrunched up. Chapter 44:15. Chin-mo looked at her. Her little face was bitter, and she looked up at him with a pitiful expression. Chin-mo's voice was hoarse. "Swallow it." She shook her head, still refusing the bitter medicine. But at this moment, Chin-mo pressed his hands on her shoulders and moved closer to her. Hee-hwan's eyes widened. She knew what he was going to do, so she immediately covered her mouth and swallowed the medicine. She was a little timid the whole time. Chin-mo looked at her and slowly let go of his hand. After he took his hand back, Hee-hwan coughed. When she saw him again, she wanted to say something, but Chin-mo stopped her. "Go to sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." She still wanted to say something, but Chin-mo had already pressed her shoulders again, half forcing her to lie down. Hee-hwan moved and said indifferently, "If you want to talk, then we have nothing to talk about." So Hee-hwan understood that she could either go to sleep now or get out. He had expressed it vividly. She had no choice but to close her eyes and sleep. Actually, she was still a little scared. She was afraid that Chin-mo would sleep with her. But she closed her eyes for a long time, and there was no movement. She opened her eyes and was stunned. Chin-mo stood at the head of the car and locked his eyes on her. He didn't say anything and just looked at her. For some reason, Hee-hwan immediately closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look at him anymore. They had been husband and wife for many years, but his gaze at this moment still made her feel a little scared. Then she closed her eyes. Chin-mo's voice was low and hoarse. "We'll talk tomorrow." As he said that, he bent over and covered her with the quilt. He looked at her deeply before he wanted to leave. His arm was caught by Hee-hwan. He turned around. Hee-hwan held him with one hand and opened her eyes. She looked at him with a pleading expression. "Chin-mo, I beg you." He looked at her quietly and said after a long time, "Go to sleep first. We'll talk tomorrow." Still, he gently pried her hand away and walked out of her sight. Hee-hwan was in a daze. After a long time, she bit her lips, and there was a hint of pain in her eyes. In fact, she knew in her heart that Chin-mo probably wouldn't give in so easily. She didn't know what he was thinking. She was very sleepy, tired, and uncomfortable. She closed her eyes and eventually fell asleep. Chin-mo walked out and looked at the table quietly. Of course, he was not in the mood to continue eating. He walked to the French window and stood there for a while, then lowered his head and lit a cigarette. He slowly smoked and stood there until late at night. His posture was cold and aloof. Actually, it was lonely at the top. Who could understand his loneliness? When the ashes between his fingers burned out, he tried again, but couldn't find anything. Only then did he let out a long sigh. Chin-mo turned and walked into the bedroom. Hee-hwan was still asleep. He looked at her quietly for a long time before taking his bathrobe to the bathroom. When he came out, he felt refreshed and quietly looked at He Huan. In the end, he was probably angry that he didn't sleep with her and slept somewhere else. When He Huan woke up early in the morning, Qin Mo had already gotten up and was tying his tie. Seeing that she sat up, he quickly tied his tie and walked over to touch her face. "You had a low fever last night." Later, he stayed by her side for the whole night. He Huan looked at Qin Mo. Her throat was a little sore and a little hoarse. "Where are you going?" "Have a meeting." He looked at her quietly. "Get up and have breakfast with me. We'll talk about it when I come back." Chapter 44:16. He Huan's lips were pale and pink. She stared straight at him and wanted to reject him, but Qin Mo said forcefully, "I'll leave in half an hour. Do as you see fit." He Huan bit her lower lip. "When are you coming back?" Qin Mo was still staring at her. After a while, he said indifferently, "About the same as last night." "You'll stay here." "What do you need?" He Huan interrupted him. "I'm here to talk to you about something." "If you can't wait, you can go back to B City," he said coldly. He Huan's temper flared up. She immediately got up, but then she regretted provoking him. In the end, she took her clothes and went to the bathroom. She came back 2 minutes later. Qin Mo sat at the dining table with a cold expression. He Huan quietly sat opposite him and began to eat breakfast. He had a Western style, and He Huan only had a bowl of red dates and longan porridge in front of her. It looked very nourishing. Qin Mo put the spoon in the bowl and looked at her. "Finish the porridge and eat the medicine." She nodded. Qin Mo was still staring at her. "I'll watch you finish it." Actually, He Huan couldn't take it anymore. "I'll eat it." "I don't believe you." Qin Mo's expression was cold. "I want to watch you finish it." He Huan could only eat the porridge silently and then eat the medicine as if she was angry. Because it was too bitter, her little face was wrinkled. She looked a little pitiful and cute. Qin Mo's face had been tense for a long time. Looking at her, he finally relaxed a little. He pushed a glass of water in front of her and said in a slightly low voice, "Drink some water." He Huan looked at him for a long time and then hummed in a low voice. Qin Mo watched her drink the water. After drinking the water, He Huan looked at him and asked, "Do you have time to talk when you come back tonight?" At this moment, she was humble because she had been tormented by him for a long time. Qin Mo said indifferently, "We'll talk when I come back." It took him a long time to come back, and he only came back late at night. He Huan was already asleep when she sensed Qin Mo returning from outside. She heard the sound of his clothes and the sound of him taking a shower. Then, he returned to the master bedroom and stood by the bed for a while. He Huan was a little nervous, afraid that he would lie next to her. But in the end, he still went out and probably slept in the guest room. After he left, He Huan finally heaved a sigh of relief. Her nerves all over her body relaxed, and she slowly fell asleep. When she woke up, she was already on the plane. He Huan got up from the bed and looked around in confusion. Just then, one of Qin Mo's secretaries came over and said in a sweet voice, "Director He, you're awake. President Qin is in a meeting." He Huan knew that they were on a private plane. She sighed. "Where are we going?" "Europe." The second secretary smiled. "France, England, Germany. About 7 or 8 countries." President Qin's schedule is very full. 7 or 8 countries, He Huan frowned. Is this official business or a vacation? The second secretary's smile was a little subtle. You'll have to ask President Qin about this. We're just his followers. How could Yi Huan not understand? She didn't say anything more. She just sat on the bed and pulled the corner of the bed to look at the clouds outside. Seeing that she didn't want to talk, the second secretary didn't dare to disturb her and left quietly. After a while, Qin Mo walked in. "You're awake." Yi Huan looked up. "Did you add sleeping pills to the milk last night?" Qin Mo didn't deny it. "I added half a pill." Chapter 44:17. After she asked, Qin Mo looked at her silently. "I added half a pill." Yi Huan was furious. "Qin Mo, you're shameless." He stared at her. "You need to rest." His tone was indifferent, but Yi Huan was well aware of the domineering and forceful tone in his voice. She didn't say much to him. She sat up and looked outside for a long time. Then she turned to look at Qin Mo. "Where are we going now?" "Can Yi Huan be sent to my mother's place?" She paused, lowered her voice, and said bitterly, "After all, I'm here with you, aren't I?" Qin Mo's eyes fell on her face. He didn't avoid the question, but he didn't agree either. He said calmly, "The Yi family has the best education environment. There's nothing wrong with sending Yi Huan there." Yi Huan stared at him. "Qin Mo, are you kidding me? Yi Huan is my child. Do you want Yi Huan to marry Yi Xiangnan like Tang Sher?" Her voice became more and more severe. "You're using Yi Huan's happiness in exchange, aren't you? I know the Yi family is powerful, but Yi Huan is my child. I won't allow it. Her guardianship is in my hands, isn't it?" Qin Mo reached out to hold her sharp chin, gently touched her, and chuckled. Yi Huan's face was pale. Of course, she knew that Yi Huan's custody was in his hands, so she had always been polite to him. However, she didn't expect him to use such a method. "Qin Mo, do you still have any feelings?" She squeezed out an embarrassed smile. "What are you going to do? Keep Yi Huan there?" Qin Mo stared at her. After a moment, he chuckled. His deep voice reverberated through the Hun's chest, sounding very manly. "Yi Huan, do you really not know what I want?" Yi Huan glared at him. Of course she knew, but she was not willing to give it to him. She knew in her heart that if she returned to Qin Mo's side once again, he would break her wings and never let her fly again. As for Yi Huan, career, life, freedom, and Yi Huan were all things that she could not give up. Yi Huan didn't answer him. Instead, she looked out the window. The private plane flew into the distance. She had followed him from country to country, passed through many places, and accompanied him to several film festivals and cocktail parties. Almost every day, Yi Huan would put on an evening gown and accompany Qin Mo to various places to socialize. After being married for so many years and then divorced, she finally realized how tiring and unhappy it was to be a qualified Mrs. Qin. For the past few days, she had been sleeping with him, and he had not touched her. But every night, she was tense. She was afraid that he would suddenly become interested. Just like that, 10 days passed. Not only did Yi Huan not recover, but she also became weaker. Qin Mo was dealing with business in the hotel suite. After the secretary finished reporting, she said, "President Qin, have you noticed that director? He doesn't look too good. Should we let her rest?" Qin Mo looked at her and closed the document. Why would she say that? The secretary told the truth. "Secretary, he said that director his health isn't good, so she asked me to remind President Qin that President Qin is a man after all, and women are more meticulous." Qin Mo frowned. "Are you saying that I'm not meticulous?" Chapter 44:18. Hearing his rhetorical question, the second secretary didn't know what to do and didn't dare to say anything. After all, President Qin was the boss and not the approachable kind. The atmosphere was a little gloomy, but she didn't expect Qin Mo to nod. Make arrangements for a private flight back in the afternoon. The second secretary's mouth fell open and her eyes widened at an abnormal angle. Qin Mo just stared at her. Are you stupid? Why aren't you going out? The second secretary turned around and left immediately. She had just closed the door when Huan came over. Looking for President Qin. The second secretary smiled. President Qin said he'll be returning in the afternoon. I'll contact the airport. The second secretary felt a little uncomfortable in front of Huan, because Huan was actually not young. She was in her early 30s, but she was small, thin, and fair. She looked like she was about 22 years old, which made her, a 28-year-old rookie in the workplace, look even older. The second secretary grabbed her hair and smiled a little foolishly. Just as she was about to leave, Huan stopped her. Thank you. Ha! The second secretary was stunned. Huan said quietly, in the morning, your President Qin said his next stop was Egypt. And now he changed his mind, probably because the second secretary had said something. The second secretary was also a smart person. Because King Entertainment was huge, it was already impressive that she could climb to become the second secretary of Chairman Qin. She didn't need to think to know what Huan meant, so she scratched her head again. It's secretary he's instructions. Huan just smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. She walked into Qin Mo's study. The second secretary stood there for a while and shook her head. Sigh, she didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing to be loved by President Qin like this. Anyway, she wasn't happy when she saw Director He. Which woman wouldn't be tired after being dragged around all over the world after giving birth? And she heard that President Qin did something Director He wasn't happy about. This couple looked harmonious, but the whole world knew there was a problem between them. Their expressions couldn't lie. Huan opened the study door and used her body to block it. She stood quietly by the door and looked at Qin Mo. Qin Mo was originally dealing with work and had his head lowered. However, he did not need to look up to know that it was her. He asked softly, "What's the matter?" Huan was still standing there and said softly, "You're going back to China in the afternoon, right?" "Yes." Qin Mo's eyes fell on the file. After a while, he closed it and looked up at Huan. "Sit on the sofa. Secretary Lu said you didn't look well. I don't think I mistreated you." Actually, she couldn't sleep well at night because she was afraid of him. But the more she was afraid of him, the angrier she got. After a few times of this, Huan's health deteriorated. He wasn't unworried. The second secretary's words were just a way for him to get out of this embarrassing situation. After Qin Mo finished speaking, Huan slowly walked over and sat down. Then, Qin Mo got up, walked over, and sat opposite her. Huan felt a little uneasy. She had never thought that one day, she would feel uneasy when she was with him. She pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. "Qin Mo, can you let me and Huan go?" "Let you go?" Qin Mo smiled. "I didn't say I wouldn't let you go. In fact, you can leave now. But you can't take Huan away." Huan was furious. "Do you have a heart? Huan is your child." Qin Mo chuckled softly. "What's wrong with the Yi family?" "Huan, you're overthinking. I'm just giving Huan a good future." Chapter 44:19. Qin Mo chuckled. "What's wrong with the Yi family?" He Huan, aren't you overthinking things? I'm just giving Yi Huan a bright future. You were the one who said that I would marry another woman in the future and have other children. So, Yi Huan is redundant just like the one you know. And I don't want to let you take advantage of me, so... Before he could finish, Jun Yen was slapped in the face. He Huan had slapped him. She was furious. Biting her lip, she glared at him. Qin Mo, you're inhumane. After she slapped him, her palm was burning. A red mark soon appeared on his face, which looked a little frightening. Qin Mo's gaze was a little scary, but he didn't get angry at her. He only said in a low voice, "Is that so? If I'm not human, then who is? Who is the beautiful existence in your heart?" He was the devil. She couldn't wait to leave. Yi Huan couldn't care less. She couldn't care less about anything. She just wanted to leave him. A sinister look flashed past Qin Mo's eyes. He had been holding it in for a long time and he didn't want to hold it in any longer. But when he stretched out his hand and saw the fear in her eyes, he suddenly realized what he had done. He had almost done the same thing again. He Huan's small body was curled up on the sofa. Her palm-sized face looked weak and weak. It was obvious that she had been bullied by him. Qin Mo's heart ached and he frowned. "I won't do anything to you." He knew that he had gone against his will. He clearly wanted to do something to her, and it was the kind of thing where he could do whatever he wanted. He was a mature man and there was no difference between having a wife and not having a wife. She wouldn't let him touch her and would show that kind of expression every time he touched her. What else could he do? Qin Mo also felt a little bored. He got up and walked into the washroom. "Take a break. We'll leave after lunch." He paused and turned his head. "You can think about your choice before flying to B-City." He Huan was still sitting on the sofa, not moving. She knew what he meant too well. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with exhaustion. After a long time, like a cat whose paw had been stepped on, she quickly jumped up and ran out. Even sharing the same space with him made her feel like a kind of restraint. When Qin Mo walked out, he saw that she was not there. His eyes were filled with some disappointment, but he did not say anything. He just quietly walked to the desk, wanting to continue working, but for a long time, he did not read a word. In the end, the documents on the table were swept to the ground by him. His heart felt even more vexed. He walked to the French window and lit a cigarette. In fact, he knew in his heart that letting go of their marriage was the best choice. She hated him and rejected him. She didn't love him anymore. However, He Huan didn't know that he couldn't bear the thought of her not loving him. Qin Mo stayed in the study until lunchtime. When he entered the dining room, He Huan was already sitting there. When she was alone, she would wear cotton home clothes. The loose clothes made her face look even smaller. Her long hair had grown to a certain length, and it was black and straight. He walked over and sat at the main seat, looking at her silently for a while. He Huan was a little lost in her thoughts. She used her fork to poke at the food. It didn't seem like she was eating, but more like she was venting something. Qin Mo silently passed a piece of streaky pork to her, and He Huan poked at it. Chapter 44:20. Qin Mo silently handed a piece of streaky pork to her, and He Huan directly poked it into her mouth. Instantly, the gravy of the streaky pork splashed everywhere, dirtying her little face. She was a little stunned and came back to her senses. Qin Mo looked at her. "You don't eat this." He Huan was very picky about food and didn't eat fat ones, but Qin Mo would occasionally eat a few pieces. He used to tease her like this, when she was distracted. He Huan came back to her senses and stared at the streaky pork in front of her. After a long time, she whispered, I don't like it. You don't like it, so you're never willing to force it, right? His words had a double meaning. He Huan, in fact, there are some things I don't like very much, but I'm willing to accommodate you. She didn't want to talk to him at all. As he said that, she put the streaky pork into her mouth. Qin Mo's eyes narrowed. Because she never ate it, no matter how many benefits and threats there were in the past, she didn't eat it. But now, she actually ate it. When He Huan ate, her expression could be called numb. Qin Mo clenched his fingers and put down his cutlery. He didn't know what kind of mood he was in. Stop eating. But He Huan was still trying hard to eat. She didn't look like she was enjoying the food, but she was enduring it. What she was enduring wasn't the food, but him. Qin Mo reached out and pinched her chin, saying word by word, I told you to stop eating. He Huan didn't move and looked at him quietly. At this time, she had eaten the streaky pork, which she hated the most since she was a child. It tasted worse than she had imagined, but it didn't seem very difficult. After a long time, she said bitterly, didn't President Qin tell me to eat it? President Qin is so powerful that I seem to have to do whatever he wants me to do. Qin Mo felt that his breathing was painful. He let go of her chin and stroked her lips. His voice was very soft and gentle, but it was creepy. Do you think I forced you? He Huan, do you really think I can force you? Have I ever forced you to do anything you don't like? You're like a zombie in there. You don't even give me a smile. You look at me as if I'm your enemy. He Huan. Are you the only one in the world who feels pain? I feel pain too. Or do you think I don't feel pain? I'm bored, and I'm just playing with you. No one asked you to do this. In contrast to his anger, He Huan was very calm. You can take back your passion and use it on other women. I think both Ai Jia and Suilio would be very willing to experience your passion. Qin Mo was still angry. He stared into her eyes and said word by word, He Huan, you have no heart. It was eaten by a dog. She didn't give in at all. Qin Mo, I'm a person, not a thing. I won't stay with you just because you like me. You can threaten me, but you really can't force me. If you want an answer, I can tell you now. My parents can be rich or ordinary. As for Yi Huan, I'll find the best lawyer to fight with you. Qin Mo narrowed his eyes. Did the streaky pork give you the courage? Yi Huan tightened her chin. Whatever you say, Qin Mo, we're finished. I won't stay with you because of your threat. It's been so many days, and I can't convince myself. Chapter 44-21. He Huan's fingers clenched into fists. Then, she got up from the dining room and walked towards the master bedroom. Qin Mo was also very fast. He quickly grabbed her hand. Where are you going? He Huan flung his hand away and said in a hoarse voice, I'm going back. I'm not going to take President Qin's private plane. Qin Mo's expression was very ugly. He Huan, do you know what you are talking about? He Huan looked at Qin Mo quietly and said with a hint of helplessness and despair in her voice, Qin Mo, you know. She looked at him as she said that. For some reason, she suddenly said, I still hate streaky pork. Then why do you still want to eat it? Qin Mo's tall body moved forward silently, giving off a sense of threat. He Huan didn't move. She just stared at him. Because I have no choice. This time, she really left. He Huan didn't have much luggage. She only had a small bag, which was mainly her passport. When she left, she didn't even look back. There was no trace of nostalgia. Chi Namo stood where he was, his slender body very tense. A moment later, he suppressed himself and called his second secretary. I won't return to B City for the time being. Chi Namo didn't go back, so Hee-hwan couldn't find him even though she wanted to. By the time Hee-hwan returned to B City, it was already 20 hours later. She was very tired, but she still insisted on looking for Wen Yuan first. She wanted to ask her about Hee-hwan's whereabouts. The two women met at a cafe, and Wen Yuan was shocked when he saw Hee-hwan. It had only been 2 or 3 months since he last saw Hee-hwan. At that time, Hee-hwan looked healthy and energetic. Although she was still young now, she looked like a fragile doll. Wen Yuan didn't know about men's aesthetics, but she thought that most men would feel sorry for her, right? As soon as he spoke, his voice was a little hoarse. How did you lose so much weight? Hee-hwan lowered her eyes. I don't know, but I had a miscarriage. I've been in poor health ever since. Wen Yuan was stunned. After a while, he said, I heard that you stayed abroad with President Qin for a long time a while ago. There was news about her every day in the entertainment newspapers, but Hee-hwan looked much better after putting on makeup. She didn't look as haggard as before. After Wen Yuan asked, Hee-hwan lowered her eyes. I want him to return Hee-hwan to me. As she spoke, she looked at Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan, I would like to ask you for a favor. Actually, Wen Yuan was already prepared, but at this moment, he was also a little flustered. She pretended to be calm and took a sip of coffee. Then, she thought for a while and said in a low voice, Hee-hwan, it's not that I don't want to help you, but Yi Mulin sent Xiangnan, Anin, and Yi-hwan to boarding school together. Moreover, it's the Yi family's arrangement, so I can't make the decision on this matter. She asked Yi Mubai, but Yi Mubai refused to say. Hee-hwan couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. However, she was well aware of the outcome. It was impossible for Qin Mo to let her take Hee-hwan away easily. He must have made a strict arrangement. Hee-hwan was stunned for a while, but she still stood up. Wen Yuan, I still have to thank you. She really couldn't blame anyone for this matter. She had to thank him for taking care of Hee-hwan. Wen Yuan also felt a little guilty. He pursed his lips and said, Hee-hwan, I'd better try my best to talk to Mubai. Maybe he can help you. At least, you can meet him on the weekend. The kids had to go home on the weekend. Wen Yuan could still make the decision to meet them, but it was probably impossible for him to leave the Yi family. Chapter 44-22. She had made it clear and Hee-hwan understood. She thanked her softly and left. She had a lot of things to do, even though she was very tired now. Wen Yuan sat there alone and finished his coffee. Then, he called Yi Mubai and said, I'm done. Come and pick me up. Yi Mubai came to pick her up immediately and arrived in less than 10 minutes. Wen Yuan got into the car and said while fastening his seatbelt, It's Hee-hwan. Yi Mubai glanced at his wife and sighed. What are you trying to say? Wen Yuan's voice continued to be indifferent. Mubai, Hee-hwan doesn't look well. You can't see the child and Qin Mo messed up the house. You men don't know how hard it is for a woman. Yi Mubai turned to look at his wife and smiled silently. How can I not know how hard it is for you? Don't I try hard to repay you every night? He was getting more and more indecent. Wen Yuan bit his lip and looked out of the window. If you want to repay me, return Hee-hwan to Hee-hwan. She looked at him anxiously. Wen Yuan was a mother and she had given birth to Yi Hui. After having a little girl, her mood was very soft. Yi Mubai touched his wife at the red light and sighed. I really can't make the decision on this matter. Qin Mo is looking for Yi Mulan. Think about my big brother. Why don't you go and persuade him? Yi Mubai sighed. Wen Yuan looked at him with a strange expression and snorted. You sound jealous. It's good that you know. His voice suddenly became gentle. So, don't worry about it. How could Wen Yuan say anything else? He merely sighed softly and did not say anything else. After He Huan left the cafe, she went to the hospital to visit Rong Yu. When she returned to Su Cheng's place, she had fainted instead of recovering. When she woke up, she was in the hospital. It was Xingyuan Hospital. She opened her eyes and saw Qin Chen's smiling eyes. Long time no see, He Huan. You look much prettier. In the past, He Huan had been running around all day. Although she was beautiful, she was still far from her current sickly and weak self. She was really beautiful now. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had an extremely weak beauty. Even Qin Chen couldn't stand looking at her, let alone a man. Moreover, Qin Chen was sure that his brother wouldn't be able to control himself. If he managed to hold it in, then he probably couldn't hold it in anymore. Just thinking about it made Qin Chen feel a little happy. On the other hand, He Huan was still very weak. She leaned against the headboard of the bed and looked very weak. Qin Chen gave her a nutrient injection and sighed. After you had a miscarriage the last time, my mother knew about it too. After that, Qin Mo sent Yi Huan to the Yi family and quarreled with my parents very fiercely. He Huan, you must have never seen my brother so crazy. It was as if he had lost his mind. It was as if he did not want anything, even Yi Huan could be sacrificed. You should know what this means, right? He Huan leaned against the bed. Her voice was a little weak, but she didn't relax at all. She said lightly, I don't care how crazy he is. I won't go back to him. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.